Didn't know how to make this video and had to take some time before saying anything that would sound dumb, but nevertheless, here we go. Unless you've been living on a different planet or completely unaware of the recent news, about 9 days ago Israel decided to launch an attack against the Islamic Republic. And the internet had a very polarizing opinion about it, and I decided to cover all of this because I want the world to know what it's like living life as a Persian, whether inside or outside of the country. Imagine you're living in the Islamic Republic of Iran where you wake up and go to sleep with nothing but propaganda all day long. Now either you're part of the 20% supporting the regime and have nothing to worry about, or part of the other 80% that live in poverty and can't think about anything other than surviving. Why is no one covering this? Because the media, the internet, and the international image are all controlled by the government to look very pristine and clean. The majority of the people work multiple jobs to support themselves and their families for just a week or two and are taxed to bankruptcy under different excuses. Grocery store prices are changed by the daily because of the inflation caused by the sanctions, and local businesses won't survive because they will only receive government backing if it benefits the regime's publicity stunts. Meanwhile, the government controls all economic operation and have the authority to confiscate any land or resources that could benefit their causes. For example, they can sign off 25-year contracts with China to let them harvest and mine everything, and in return, they are currently receiving nothing. They went from having almost 50% of the rights to use the Caspian Sea and the Persian Gulf to only a measly 10%, giving them off to Russia and China, and in return, they still received nothing. The politicians and their families would also embezzle billions upon billions worth of assets in USD to offshore accounts so that their families can acquire citizenships to other countries and live luxurious lives that they boast on social media, while a regular person in Iran cannot afford to make a local trip to a different city, let alone go abroad for a single day. That is, if that person would be able to be granted a visa to enter another country, because if you look it up, Iranian passport holders are basically under heavy travel restrictions, all because of the Islamic regime. Now, a sane person would ask why the people didn't revolt under all of this pressure and change the regime. We did. Many times we did, but the thing is that the dictator has a private army called the Islamic Republic Guard Corps, or the IRGC, and they are mobilized to deal with unruly citizens or conduct terror attacks and abductions, torture and public executions if you speak against the government. About 3 years ago, the people protested for the unjust death of Mahsa Amini by the hands of the moral police, but the regime killed an estimated 500 to 1,000 people a day over the course of months in broad daylight, arrested and executed countless lives in retaliation, all because they protested the forceful wearing of hijab and complaining about the cost of living. Roughly 5 years ago, there was another protest because the price of few basic grocery items such as eggs, dairy and produce, and meat was raised in a single week, but salaries were not due for adjustment by law. Almost 15 years ago, there was a nationwide protest followed by riots because Ahmadinejad's second-term presidency was rigged by the supreme leader, and these are just the 3 major ones that were covered by international media. The world outside of Iran doesn't get to see or hear about these because the Iranian internet and media are state-controlled, and if the government notices even the slightest hint of opposition or protest happening, they will immediately shut it all down so that their narrative of everything being safe and sound doesn't change. This is life for those inside of Iran, and it doesn't just stop there. If a citizen other than the family of the government elite wants to exit this giant prison, there are a couple of methods. Either you will go through mandatory service and serve the regime as a soldier to acquire a passport, or you must obtain a permit to go outside the country with a hefty bond to ensure that you will eventually come back. There is also an illegal way of being smuggled to a country with a UNHCR outpost so that you may become a refugee as well, but none of these options come cheap. The worst part is that even if you manage to exit Iran, pretty much every country in the world, with maybe an exception of 10 countries, will demand you to apply for a visa issued by their embassy, which will take months due to the high risk factor of just being Iranian, and that they need to conduct a thorough background check for their own safety. When it comes to those with a permanent or long-term residency status in the outside world, the regime doesn't leave them alone either. Since the Islamic Republic did not accept the FATF terms for anti-terrorism, drug trafficking and money laundering regulations, banks will refuse service to Persians unless they can be convinced with extreme difficulty. And believe me when I say this, that a lot of companies will straight up refuse to interview or hire Iranians because of this exclusion from the world's financial systems. Meanwhile, businesses registered and operated by Persians will face heavy FATF penalties and have their accounts frozen or suspended, while there is no way of receiving or allocating funds from the Iranian banks either, because they are heavily sanctioned as well. There is also an added risk that if a Persian with dual citizenship visits Iran, they will be abducted by the government to be tortured in their prisons for the suspicion of espionage. Alternatively, they can be forced to use their second nationality to work as a sleeper agent for the IRGC so that they can conduct their operations internationally. Best case scenario would be that they are just held hostage so that their respective second home nation would pay their ransom to be freed. Just to not overgeneralize, most of the Iranians who manage to acquire second citizenship or be granted an asylum request are kinda exempt because they are not an Islamic Republic citizen any longer, even though they are Iranian ethnics. The not so funniest part is that migration by becoming an asylum seeker or acquiring a citizenship by investment is not an easy task for the current generation either, as the bare minimum requirements would be nigh impossible to get for ordinary citizens unless they are related to one of the top brass of the regime. I can go on and on for hours about the struggles many people such as myself have endured, and that would be only scraping the tip of the iceberg while we still haven't reached the current war story. And do you really want to know where this all began? About 50 years ago, Iran went through the Islamic Revolution to overthrow the Shah and to end the Pahlavi monarchy, to place Ayatollah Khomeini in power, and the guy was thought to be well supported by groups like MEK and the clergy and the majority of the Muslim population in Iran. However, after Khomeini got into power, he started genocide against those who helped him get there under the excuse of betrayal and ridding the Islamic nation from traitors. And afterwards, Saddam Hussein decided to jump into the circus and start the 8-year war with Iran, which it ended in a stalemate and they both issued a ceasefire. Bottom line, a very tough upbringing for the Islamic Republic. However, that's nowhere near close enough to cover everything that happened and to justify Israel's involvement. So what's the Islamic Republic's manifesto and core beliefs? The Shia faith revolves around 4 main books that have a prophecy about the end times and how a 1500-year-old dude who is supposedly still currently living has chosen this prick to act as God's representative on earth until the day of judgment. And quite literally, those 4 books put the Jewish people as the main antagonists for no reason in particular, and since this isn't a religion explanation video, I'd suggest you go ahead and read up on it. Overall, when the Ayatollah took over Iran, for the past 47 years, they've preached not only just anti-Semitic things, but they've been saying down with US, UK, West, and pretty much any country or nation that doesn't have this flag. And they primarily targeted this propaganda towards Israel and the Jews. Bottom line is that the Ayatollah have been saying whack things and fantasizing about a war with Israel for about 50 years. Now, the Israelis and Palestinians had a long-lasting beef of their own for ages over this region, which came in as an excuse to them because the Islamic regime during its early days decided to form the IRGC, then sponsor and back a bunch of militant groups in Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, and Palestine that would do the dirty work of fighting the Israelis on their behalf, while simultaneously the Islamic Republic could claim that this ain't their handiwork and they are innocent of all charges. So where do all these stories lead to? While during the Pahlavi rule, the Shah was signing contracts with the Siemens company to legally build nuclear power facilities in Iran and negotiate deals that could have potentially made Iran become more like the modern day Singapore or the UAE. When the Islamic Revolution happened, since day one, Khomeini and later on Khamenei were threatening nuclear Armageddon on every non-Muslim nation, which made the Western nations and their allies place sanctions and embargo over the entire Islamic Republic to limit Iran's involvement. But this entire mess didn't just stop there. I just want to pause here for a moment to tell you that I believe there is no good guy or bad guy in this story, because pretty much all of the involved parties did something wrong, but the Ayatollah and the Islamic regime did pretty much everything wrong, and they should be held accountable for all of it. They condemned all of us to an unending misery. So with all the threats and propaganda the Islamic regime spread over the years, fast forward to a couple weeks before October 7th, where Hamas bombed the concert. At that time, their leaders attended a military ceremony in Iran to retake the Shia oath, and the IRGC commanders along with the Supreme Leader Khamenei issued a fatwa, which is basically a type of jihad order, to begin the war on Israel. Then on October 7th, Hamas launches their attack, and this entire entire mess starts. The IDF responds with attacking Hamas, then Hezbollah, then Bashar Assad's Syria, and now the Islamic Republic. In the end, this coward and his minions got their wish of having a big fight with Israel, but they are hiding in their bunkers since day one of the attacks, while the population is terrified, displaced, and struggling to survive. The saddest part is that nowadays the Islamic regime labels us traitors because we do not want to become their cannon fodder. They call us traitors because we do not want this war, and we don't want anything to do with it, and we have abandoned fighting for this dictator. They bring up patriotism and nationalism to encourage the Iranians to join this fight and support the regime and hope that they can bless us with a better future, while the government threatened all of us with mass executions if we do not cooperate. The same way that Hamas was using the civilian population in Gaza as human shields, the Islamic Republic is placing their missile launchers and military assets in hospitals and school zones so that the IDF does not attack them. They shut down the internet for many days to avoid people sending out the reality of living in the war zone so that the international media would not notice it. They are even running publicity events under NIAC, which is a pro-Islamic Republic lobbying group in the United States that was formed by Javad Zarif, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, to gain support and sympathy for the regime. What they want from us is to help them win this war so that once it's all over, we can resume our oppressive lifestyles. Do I support Israel's attacks? I don't know, and I don't know how to feel about it. Do I see them as the good guy or the bad guy or the savior? I have no answer for that question either. But what I know is that very much like every Persian right now, I'm scared for the loved ones I have that are stuck in Iran. If the regime falls, they might see a better future than what they have now. But if the Ayatollah remain in power, I know it could be certain doom for them. I know that Israel's attacks on Gaza and Lebanon were very brutal and unjust and inhumane, and I would say their justification of survival to avoid nuclear holocaust is logical, yet there is no valid justification for the innocent lives that were lost in this war. And it doesn't matter if those lives were Palestinian, Israeli, Lebanese, American, or Persian. War never changes and it will destroy everyone's lives. Even as you're watching this, I've read the news that the US and UK are preparing to join on the fight, and all I can say is that I don't know what the future holds for us. If I say stop the war and war is bad, I'm knowingly supporting these vile creatures who will definitely harm my people along with the rest of the world and destroy everything, whether it is in Iran or outside of Iran, until nothing remains. And if I say no, continue this war by all means, I would have to face the backlash that I'm supporting Israel or child murder, war crimes and things like that. I don't know, man. All I can say is, if anyone out there is watching this video, please know why and how this entire mess started and know the truth before calling anyone a traitor. Some people are really looking forward to that by the end of this war, the Islamic regime is completely done for and the people can rebuild Iran to its former beautiful days. I would like to end this video with a call to action that at least let my voice be heard by sharing this video to enlighten anyone who doesn't know why there is World War III on the way. This depressive state is where I have been since it started, and instead of focusing on the Warhammer videos or working on other projects because I can't get my head wrapped around anything. On the other hand, on my second channel for my Persian audience, I have been broadcasting the latest news 24/7 with a couple of friends who volunteered to take up on the giant task of reading and combing the internet and fact-checking all the sources and outlets we can find about the recent developments of the war. This way at least we could alarm our fellow Persian and Israelis of any attack warnings or strike zones in hope of making an impact and minimizing the civilian death toll in this stupid war. Thank you for watching.